welcome you to this inter-university debate. This is the fourth group, and out of the fourth group, this is the second university in this interface. Previously, we had other three groups that participated, and in the first group, we saw Muwaya University and Valley University make it to the quarterfinals. In the second group, we saw IUIU, that is Islamic University in Uganda, and Uganda Pentecostal University make it to the quarterfinals. In the third group, we saw Muwaya University Business School and Kampala International University make it to the quarterfinals. I'm your moderator for today's debate. My name is Lakay Gender Fancy. I'm an advocate, I'm a lecturer and a tax consultant. Today with us, we have a panel from Nkumba University, and we are very, very, very excited to have you for this debate. In this group, last week, we had Muwaya University of Science and Technology who debated the same topic, and it was an interesting discussion. And I'm very, very excited to have this panel today. Our topic for today is innovation is the world's emerging biggest employer, and the creative industry is the heart of innovations. Does Uganda have the necessary enablement for the sector? It's our topic today, Thursday, 15th of December, 2021. Our program is running from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. and it is brought to you by Center for Constitutional Governance and Civic Space TV. I would like to introduce my panel. I'm going to let my panelists introduce themselves. I'll start from the first panelist, and that is Lester. Lester, you have the floor to introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Fancy, and all those watching us on Face TV. My name is Muwaya Ibrahim. I'm a student of law, second year, Nkumba University.
Thank you so much, Ibrahim. Our second panelist for today's debate is Abdu. Abdu, you can introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Leka. Like you did just say, my name is Amanya. Amanya Abdu is my name. I'm a Muslim, a Pan-African, and a law student at Nkumba University. It's a pleasure joining you here. A very good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Abdu. So far, our two panelists are all lawyers in the making. So we have two other panelists who are going to join us in a bit. Our third panelist is Garang, Kuot, Lester. And our fourth panelist is Hopkins Ainomujuni. So they are going to join us in a bit, but we are going to start our discussion today. Now, to introduce this very interesting topic for today, we have seen the importance of innovation and creativity elsewhere outside Uganda, in countries like China, like the US, and other countries. We have also seen the importance of innovation and creativity here in Uganda. Now, before this program, I was reading a research by Muwaya University, which was supported by Resilient Africa Network, which was conducted on, it was a rapid assessment of the current environment for technological innovation in Uganda. And that research revealed a report that indicates that there is evidence to show that Ugandan innovators are generating an abundance of ideas. But of those ideas, few reach a stage of full implementation or demonstrate scalability and self-sustainability. So why is this happening? My very, very, very interesting panel is going to discuss this today. We have also seen Uganda is grappling with problems of youth unemployment. Can innovation and creativity be a solution to this problem? All this will be discussed today by my panelists. Among other things, they'll be discussing what innovation and creativity are, the current status of creativity and innovation in Uganda, whether Uganda has enablers for the creative and innovation sector, and also government can support and activate innovation and creativity in this country. So all those issues will be unpacked by the panelists from Nkumba University that I introduced earlier. Let me just repeat the topic today is innovation is the world's emerging biggest employer, and the creative industry is the heart of innovation. Does Uganda have the necessary enablers for the sector? So this is going to be the structure of our debate today. So the panelists, you're going to give us opening statements first by each panelist. You'll give us an opening statement. And in your opening statement, you'll be answering a question that I will ask you. Then secondly, the second stage of our debate, we shall have one general question that will be answered by all the panelists. The third stage, we shall have specific questions directed to each panelist, depending on how you will argue your case in your opening statement and when answering the general question. And then lastly, we shall have closing remarks from our panelists. So I hope my panelists are as excited as I am for this debate. I can see Hopkins has joined us. So Hopkins, kindly introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hopkins Ainomujuni. I'm a legal scholar at Muwaya University. Today we're going to talk about whether Uganda has, whether Uganda has to get innovation in the creativity is the heart of. Okay. My name is Hopkins, and I'm the debate president of Nkumba Debate Union. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Hopkins. We would like to now go into a debate with opening statements. And the first person who is going to give us an opening statement, let me start right from Hopkins, who is ready to give us her opening statement. So Hopkins, you're going to give us your opening statement. And in your opening statement, you're going to explain to us what creativity and innovation is.
So thank you very much. Today we are talking about the world's emerging biggest employer, and the creativity industry is the heart of this innovation. So does Uganda have the necessary enablers for the sector? That is the question. So first of all, we have to know what the meaning of innovation is. And accordingly, I believe that the meaning of innovation is more of like revolution, whereby someone brings in a new method, an idea, or a new product. Innovating is making changes in something by establishing a new thing or bringing something on table with new ideas, new methods, and new products. And then the creativity industry itself is the industry where people come up with their own talents. They use their own talents to bring in new things or new ideas. We have creativity industries in the science and technology sector. We have the arts and design industry. All this is like it's like a creativity industry. Now, when we are talking about this, we have to first ask ourselves, what is the history of creativity in the world and in Uganda, and then the current creativity industry in Uganda? And are there enablers that help this innovative industry? And if they are there, are there barriers? Is it sufficient enough? Is it efficient? And if they're not there, why do we think they're not there? And that is the basis of today's debate. And in my opening statement, I'll emphasize that I believe that Uganda has enablers in this sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hopkins, for your opening statement. I would like to bring Ibrahim into the discussion. So Ibrahim, it's time for you to give us your opening statement. And just like Hopkins did, you are going to give us the current status of the creativity and innovation sector in Uganda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Innovation is the world's emerging #1 employer, and the creativity is at the heart of it. Uganda has grappled with the development of innovation for a number of years. We see that we have the Culture Center Act, which was enacted as way back as 1959. Uganda is a status party to the International Convention on Culture and Social Rights. And in Article 15 of that convention, state parties are encouraged to come up with enabling laws and policies to promote and enhance the enjoyment of culture, creation, science, and so on. The same goes to, I think, Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is the mother of rights or human rights in the world. And that article says every country shall make it its agenda to ensure that citizens enjoy their cultures, right to innovation and science. The Constitution of Uganda in Article 246 creates the cultural institutions and promotes enjoyment of culture. The national objectives and directives of state health policy of the Constitution of Uganda also enjoin the Ugandan state to promote cultures that respect human dignity and are not detrimental to other people's rights. Now, the state of innovation in Uganda is that we have a vibrant innovation and creativity industry, especially in the creative arts. New musicians are emerging every day. We have a national action plan. In fact, it has got expired on culture and the creative industries. This was initiated by the president after the presidential investments roundtable, I think of 2009. Now, among the proposed policies for this action plan is the formation of an innovation authority. We have some laws that protect innovation, like the Creative and the Neighboring Act and so on. The state of creativity and innovation in Uganda is that while we have all these policies in state or in position, it is baffling that there are still many challenges. First and foremost, they are not disseminated enough. The people who are supposed to benefit from these laws do not know them enough to be able to advocate or to use them to advocate their rights. So as a result, we have a community with very many innovators, with very many creative persons who don't genuinely benefit commercially from their enterprises because they are not aware of how to adequately protect themselves and also protect their investments. So creative artists and other people in the creative world mostly perform or operate at an informal level. Very few businesses are registered to formally operate and be able to benefit from the operations of a formal sector, like acquiring loans to fund their activities from financial institutions such as banks. So it happens that while Uganda recognizes that the performing arts, the creative arts, the innovation in the science, in the music, in art and design, in all other forms of activities is important. We don't have, or the population does not adequately benefit from their ideas. Lastly, on this matter, is the quality of the population itself. The capacity of the population to understand and appreciate satire at a general level is lacking. So you may find that the population itself limits bending towards moral inclinations, cultural values, and so on, limits the scope of innovation. A case in hand is the Stella Nyanzi article that historically described the president and for which she was dragged to prison. And the population was in support saying, oh, that was a hit under the belt on the person of the president. But understood from a satirical point of view, you may find that this article is not as offensive as it is propagated. So when the population lacks the capacity to understand and appreciate the different levels in which creativity can be expressed, then it limits the extent, it limits the liberty, it limits the freedom of the would-be innovators on what they can put on the market. So music gets censored. I remember some time back, there was a musician, I think he died, Master Blaster, who came up with a song, Mboko. And this song was considered obscene even when there was no specifically pronounced obscene word in the song. And it could not be played on the airwaves in the country because it is perceived to be against the well-streamlined cultural beliefs, traditions, morals, and standards in the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ibrahim, for giving us the current status of innovation and creativity in Uganda. Let me bring Abdu into the discussion. So Abdu, you kindly give us your opening statement. And my question to you is, why do you think that it's important to adopt creative means and innovation in our system?
Thank you so much, Leka. And once again, a very good afternoon to you and fellow panelists. Now, the topic we're discussing is one which is very interesting. And logically, any person who is sane would want to interest himself by participating in this or by even contributing in this as well. Now, Leka, let me begin with this, that innovation is not a first instance occurrence on the face of this earth. I really don't think so. Innovation is as old as early man. Innovation is as old as the Bourgeoisie dynasty. Okay, so to talk about innovation right now is to assess how much we have benefited from innovation and how far or where we intend to move with innovation itself. Now, in order not to waste a lot of time, I want to agree with Win in defining what innovation is. And basically, for emphasis anyway, that innovation is bringing something new on the table. You see, I did say that innovation is as old as the existence of mankind, okay? We have seen that at the time of creation, there was no fire. But what does man do? Man creates fire. That is innovation, the first innovation to be recorded. Now, the battery is also coming. They bring in iron smelting. Why do they bring it? To produce tools for cultivating, for hunting, and for all other activities that they use the tools for. Now, innovation is something which is not new. But this is the problem that we tend to have as people, as Ugandans, for instance, that we tend to look at innovation as something which is too big and something alien to us. Why does this scenario occur? To the best of my understanding, it comes back to appreciation. We do not tend to recognize the things that we do, and we do not tend to appreciate the efforts that we put in. For example, a person from my ancestral home would carve a pound and pestle out of the wood and use it for pounding zinners. And out of that, a paste is produced. But this industry has failed to spy, it has failed to take root until the machines come from China, from Japan, or wherever, that people go to grind them, to mill their grains or to grind their paste and all that. Yet ideally, we used to have these machines at hand. Even before the pound and pestles came in, people used stone for grinding. Are we together? Now you realize that humans, or we had innovation from the very start of our existence as human beings. But the question is, how have we moved, and how far have we moved ever since we started this? I did say that there is a fundamental problem of recognition and appreciation of the innovations that we bring on board. Now, before we talk about creativity, we ought to understand that creativity comes into an innovation which is already in existence. Now, creativity comes in where there is a diverse or a myriad of innovations on table, that for you to stand out, for you to be better than other persons, you have to bring something which is unique, not necessarily new, but something unique to what other people have. Let's say, for example, we are all designing a pound and pestle. But for me, the creativity here is that I beautify mine with a piece of art so that it becomes attractive to the users or to the buyers. And at the end of the day, I expand my production to that event there. In essence, this is what I'm saying, that for creativity to come in, there must be innovation of sort. And and creativity comes basically to better the innovation which we have at hand. Now, this takes me to the next concept. How ready are we as Ugandans? How ready are we? Have we appreciated innovation enough that we can proceed and benefit? How shall we tap into the innovation industry to benefit enormously? Now, that begs the question of the role of government into this. Ibrahim, in his preambulatory statements, did talk about the legal frameworks and the institutions that are in place. But I want to differ from him slightly, that innovation is not an act of government. The role of the government, in essence, is to provide the framework or to provide the path upon which innovation would rather thrive. And to the best of my knowledge, and as a matter of fact, these provisions or these pathways are in existence. But now the question still remains, how has these pathways enable innovation to prosper and so that people benefit from it? Now, I will respond to this by saying that no, it is not the duty of government to innovate. The government has to basically provide provisions or to make provisions that would aid the development and maximization of the potential of the people of the country. You see, the problem of over-reliance on the government is that it delays creation, it delays the creation of things. For example, if at all we apparently we do not have copyright laws which are too strong to protect each and every innovations that are at hand. The musicians do not have copyright laws to protect their music, and anybody can steal it. Anybody can purloin any concept that has been incubated by the person. Now, the government will have to definitely do something about it to provide a legislation that will protect innovators and their patents. Now, the absence of this law or this legislation does not necessarily mean that you should not innovate, because innovation is the essence of our existence in the first place. It's either you innovate for your own interest or else you innovate for the betterment of the entire society. There are situations whereby you may not necessarily have something at hand where you'll be forced to innovate for you to survive at that material point in time there. That is very possible. Now, the over-reliance on the government is what I find problematic, and we ought to move away from there. The government should come in after when we have already started and yet we are moving forward. Because to make a provision for something which is abstract becomes a little bit challenging. Be it as it may, my emphasis is the reliance on government for innovation and for production is dangerous for us as human beings. We ought to do things to better our society. We'll appeal to the government to come and make provisions that will aid us to move forward. But again, interestingly, I do not think materially that government can actually regulate creativity. I really do not agree with that. I understand that creativity is a personal trait and it depends on a person. The way I may create something will not be the same way Ibrahim would create a thing. We have telephones that each and every person is holding right now. But when we check the phones that we are having, each and every person has a different kind of phone that he uses, different brand of phone. The bottom line or the denominator is these are all phones, but the capacity, the effectiveness, the technologies used differs, and this differs according to the creativity of the innovators. Now, we ought to appreciate that the government has a role to play, but the role of government comes in after we have something at hand. It will be too unfortunate for us if at all we tend to begin blaming government from down, yet we haven't actually produced something. Now, it pushes me to the effect of government as well. Leka, you're checking in, you're just...
Yeah, I'm waiting for you to conclude.
Please, conclusively, I have two statements to that effect there. One is how has government particularly failed the innovation industry? And this is my thinking, my respectful thinking, that the government has failed the innovation industry through taxation and through establishing bureaucratic channels that tend to delay the startup processes of innovation industries. And I find that is too problematic, and the government ought to really do something about it. If at all someone is producing a goods or innovating, the government shouldn't necessarily impose taxes on this, especially when they are baby or infant industries. Now, how do we come into employment? How do we benefit as a result? Now that if at all we are producing and there is no interference from the government, and that the people are appreciating our innovations, definitely, whether we like it or not, at the end of the day, people will be empowered or people will be motivated to produce things, knowing very well that there is a consumer who is ready and there is no encumbrances from the government side. I beg to open with that statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Abdu. Let me move to Lester. So Lester, you'll start by introducing yourself since you joined us later, and then you'll give us your opening statement. And in your opening statement, the question to you is, what creative and innovation skills do you think are needed today in Uganda?
Okay, thank you, Fancy. I just want to be sure I'm being heard before I proceed. Someone can just confirm maybe, and then I proceed.
Yes, we can hear you perfectly well.
Okay, that's cool. My name is Garang Kuot. Lester is my name. I'm a third-year student of law at Nkumba University, and I'm honored to be a panelist in this important discussion around creativity and innovation. What creative skills are available or that would be able to propel innovation, or what skills therefore exist? That is just my understanding of the question. And you see, I want to appreciate the fact that I'm speaking after people like, I think that would be nice. Yes, what creative? Go on.
The question to you is, what creative and innovation skills are needed today in you?
Okay, thank you. What creative and innovative skills or innovation skills are needed in Uganda today? And I think I'll just like to begin my contention, especially with the previous panelists, is going to come from creativity and innovation as are being defined. And I did not listen so much to Hopkins when she defined, because I came a bit late. But You see, creativity and innovation go hand in hand, because innovation is the creation of new things. And I'd like to simply extrapolate from Abdu that an innovator is someone who is able to come up or who brings new things to solve pressing challenges. That innovation is a creation of new solutions to challenges or to pressing challenges. And in a country like Uganda, where there's so many things that are facing us, where there are so many problems, it should be a classical illustration of an innovative sort of garden or an innovative battleground, because this is where innovation should be taking place, because there's a lot of challenges. I'll tell you why that is not happening later in my opening statement. But then also creativity, maybe unlike what Abdu said, creativity and innovation, apart from being mutually inclusive, they don't necessarily, it's not necessarily creativity that propels that innovation that propels creativity. I think I would simply say that it is creativity in and of itself that actually propels innovation, because creativity is the ability to come up with something new. So remember, I said that innovation is coming up with something new to solve challenges that are pressing. And therefore, the ability then to come up with that thing that is new to solve a problem, whether it is a product, whether it is a service, whether it is an idea, the ability to come up with that is what we call creativity. So a creative person is the one that is able to come up with these new things. Now, from that state understanding, with the challenges relating to access to healthcare, challenges relating to access to education, and also challenges relating to even access to food and maybe clean water in themselves, all these things should make a classical case for why there should be a thriving atmosphere of innovation. And when I was listening to Muwaya, he mentioned a very interesting legal background of enablers that have been put in place by the government to then propel innovation, to make sure that innovation thrives, and to make sure that maybe the idea of innovating is not stifled. And from that background, I would argue or assert that it is true that the enablers actually exist. So where the issue therefore comes in is the link between the enablers and what the idea of innovation and creativity actually is. I mean, the music industry, the performing art industry, the science industry, and so many other things. There is the legal, but then when you look at the other side, it doesn't simply teach the placing of laws in place or perhaps guidelines in place that therefore innovation and creativity industry is therefore enabled to thrive. That's not just how it stops. It goes over and above the provision of these facilities to the kind of information that people get, and also the kind of environment in which people therefore exist. And that is where my question therefore comes in. So what creative and innovative skills are therefore needed? One, we need the ability to be civically equipped, because civic awareness is one of the things that is needed, one of the skills that are needed. Because with civic awareness comes the easiest access to information regarding what challenges are being faced. But if the populace is civically aware, they know how they are governed, and if there is a problem with how they are governed, they would therefore innovatively come up with solutions to that effect. They also have information about, there are so many, there is a very pressing information relating to budget. The process of national budgeting, or the national budgeting process or procurement processes, these are things that should be very transparent for people to actually have access to this information. And then the access to this then forms what I call civic awareness. So a civically informed citizenry is the one that is able to always realize that there is a problem here, there's a problem there, and then actively innovate and apply their creativity to provide that solution. That's one. The second thing is education. Education has gone beyond literacy. You see, they said, some famous person said it a couple of years ago, that the illiterates of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but maybe those who cannot learn and learn and relearn. And I think that is what is happening. There's so many people who can actually read and write, but that doesn't mean they are equipped enough with the skills that are necessary to innovate and to be creative. And that's why the idea of education, especially in the broader perspective, then comes. What kind of education do we get? We still get the rudimentary education that simply is facilitated by the systems that are still wanting. And if people are not properly educated, it becomes really hard for them to innovate or even to apply their creativity. And I'm very careful when I'm speaking about creativity because I don't want to make it look like they are going to acquire creativity. Like Abdu said, creativity is inherent. People are born creative. It is stifled by the circumstances to which we are subjected. So for everybody, education has to be proved scientifically. People need to have access to internet because right now it has been bloody nose to get kids to study during COVID, because what COVID did is it removed the access by teachers to students. And the only way that was going to be possible is if people have access to technology, access to internet, and are able to actually use this. So that means the next innovation industry is going to be inherently premised on your ability to use technology or to leverage on the same, therefore use or apply your idea. So that's why education in the broader perspective is really, really important. Thirdly, there is need for political will. And I'm very careful when I speak about political will, because these days people have problems speaking about politics or political will. But the will of the leaders that sit in the boardrooms to craft policies that therefore are applied to either propel or stifle anything, including innovation and creativity, must be something that is informed by the need to propel the industry of creativity and innovation. So if there is no political will, Muwaya Ibrahim was painting a picture of someone who became victim because of the application of creativity. So if such things still exist, then I can argue that there is no political will to propel innovation and creativity. And until that is in place, people will keep churning behind, even when they can actually apply their creativity to be innovative and apply better solutions to those things. And also, you see, Uganda doesn't exist in isolation. We are a country in a region of East Africa, in Africa, or in the entire globe. The world is continuously becoming a global village. So there have to be metrics in place for people to access information from other parts of the world, and for people to therefore juxtapose what is happening in some other parts of the world with what is happening in Uganda, and then draw the lines and identify the nuances, and therefore draw conclusions to either innovate to some level. So if all these things are in place, then if all these skills are propelled or all these skills are in place, then the creativity and innovation industry will really thrive. Thank you. Fancy?
Thank you so much, Lester, and thanks for being very elaborate on that. So we have finished the first stage of our debate, the first stage, and that was the opening statement. So thank you to our panelists, and I like that the discussion is very elaborate and our panelists are really prepared. So we are going to shift now to the second stage of our debate, where our panelists are going to answer the general question. This question will be answered by all of you. And the question is, does Uganda have the necessary enablers for the creative and innovation sector? I will start with Hopkins. Hopkins, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. So does Uganda have the necessary enablers for creative, it has. Uganda has them. And what are these enablers? Well, Garang Lester, in his last speech, he was listing down some of those enablers. And I'm going to generalize them and call them the intellectual property. In this COVID-19 situation, Uganda has had transitions towards the knowledge in the people in this economy. People have started creating more new things, and especially they have based on the intellectual property, the Zoom meetings, the Google Meets that have happened, the activism that has happened, the civic spaces that are going on, the education that is happening online, the political campaigns that are going on, all these things, it is intellectual property. People are now going to get sensitized about what they need to do to create creativity. Remember, creativity is supposed to be like something that that people do, a new idea that provides like an employment, okay? So yes, the necessary enablers. The major necessary enabler in Uganda is the intellectual property. We have enough brain in Uganda. We have youth who think beyond. I have examples of people who have invented things in Uganda, and it is through this intellectual property. For example, when you were struck by COVID-19, people talked about, actually, Uganda, we can come up with our own virus. Why do we have to export intellectual property? Why do we have to export doctors to come and do for us things? That's how Mr. Ogwang from Bara University of Science and Technology came in. And you know what? He did COVIDX. COVIDX has tried to help the COVID-19 situation in Uganda. Everyone can agree with me on that. And then we have invented a diesel machine by university students at Makerere University. And this shows that people are trying to invent, people are trying to become creative because there is intellectual property. People are being sensitized. Now, if we have more activists who make people more aware of their rights, especially from the government. I heard Ibrahim saying that the government should enable innovation. Yes, what will enable people to ensure that the government carries out its own duty, its own purpose? People have to have the knowledge. That is the civic equipment that Garang Lester was trying to bring. This is all covered in intellectual property. People have to have the knowledge, then they come up and they advocate. They come up with creative skills, then they advocate to the government for support. Then the government will come in and then support these people, and then we shall have an enhanced creative process. So the barriers in Uganda is that people do not get to know their rights, but because of increasing civic space, activism, and all this, we are going to see a once better innovated Uganda, because you cannot compare Uganda of 2012 with the Uganda of 2021. Remember that time the ICT was very low. Now Uganda, we have the techno in Uganda, internet going. We are creating more television stations. Our music industry, we have very many musicians. The problem is that these musicians need people to boost them, to boost their talent. We just don't need to export the creative people or the intellectual property, because we already have it in Uganda. And that is my view on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hopkins, who said, yes, Uganda has the enablers. So our panelists, feel free to disagree with your colleagues, and let me bring Ibrahim into the discussion, still to answer the general question posed. Does Uganda have the necessary enablers for the creative and innovation sector? Ibrahim, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Fancy, and my panelists and other fellow panelists and other viewers. I think the keyword here is necessary. And what is necessary may be broader than what meets the eye. When we are looking at necessary enablers, the legal framework, the policy aspect, and then the general environment. So if we are talking in terms of legal framework, yes, Uganda has a sufficiently adequate legal framework that can help us promote innovation. We can talk of things like the Constitution itself. It advocates economic rights. It advocates the enjoyment of culture. It enjoins the government in the national objectives to promote innovation and creativity. we have laws like intellectual property and naming rights. We have other laws like the Cultural Center Act and so on, all of which have been put in place to enable or promote innovation. We also have frameworks within government, policy frameworks. When you look at something like Vision 2040, they talk of the creative economy. And the creative economy is about promoting creativity and innovation and ensuring that they make a contribution financially or economically to the country. We have the Ministry of Labor, Gender, Labor and Social Development. And one of its goals is to promote culture and to promote innovation and so on. Like I said earlier, we have the National Action Plan on Culture and Creativity. So even in terms of policy, we even have the National Creative Economy Policy in Uganda. All of these have been put in place. I think they are talking of, if they have not already established, the National Creative Culture and Creative Authority to manage and regulate. So in terms of law and policies, I can say Uganda has necessary enablers. What is actually lacking and where Uganda falls short within the environment. And I look at the creative environment, the innovative environment in terms of one, the people themselves. The people who innovate, many of them, if we look at things like the performing arts, many of them are getting to a commercial level by accident. People take creativity as a hobby. Somebody draws a piece of art as a hobby. Somebody sings a song as a hobby. Somebody writes a poem as a hobby. Now, if by chance they were to have it published and then it becomes a hit, then they can start earning a little here and there from it. And there should be a deliberate push for people to engage in innovation as a commercial activity. And that level of formalization of institutions that will help people to engage actively and use or assert their rights, economic rights, are arranging out of their creativity, coming from their creativity and innovation is what is lacking. Much as we have the Uganda Registration Services Bureau, how many of the people who are coming up with a song in the village out there know that they can actually go and register their idea and then protect it, and so that they can enjoy it? How many of us even know how Facebook, how Twitter, how WhatsApp, how Zoom use and apply the data and the information that we put on our platforms, on all our pages, on those platforms? So the knowledge aspect of it is lacking. Two, like I said earlier in my opening remarks, the world in which we are performing is a traditional world. It is a traditionally inclined world. I remember, I think it was around 2004 when women in this country tried to arrange a women's forum to talk about women's problem. And this forum could not take effect because it was called the vagina monologue. And The whole problem was the use of the word vagina in their platform. So how can they call it the vagina monologue? Now, when we have a pretentious economy and a pretentious population, which does not allow, which is resistant to anything that is different from what they believe in, that limits the extent and exertion of the people who are supposed to innovate, and it becomes as a hindrance. It becomes a hindrance to the innovation itself. Ugandan is the innovator of Uganda are not. Uganda does not have a legal policy to protect the nascent innovation industry against the attack from the outside world. Today, if you are making a drama to show on Ugandan TV, you were Ugandan artist coming up with a Ugandan drama, you are competing with the soaps from Mexico, you are competing with the soaps from Finland, is it the Philippines? In fact, our TV content is more of the Western soaps, is more of the Western movies, is more of externally innovated things. So that limits the growth of the local innovation industry, because it cannot compete. Bakayimbira drama actors cannot compete with Bollywood. They cannot compete with Nollywood. They cannot compete with Hollywood. And there isn't that protection to give them to maybe say, yes, I have heard of things like 60% of programs being local content, but how much of it is dedicated to creativity and innovation? You will find that the local content is political programs, the local content is adverts from local markets, but it is not, there is no deliberate move to push innovation through our local media. And also, in terms of the environment, I talked about the mindset of the people, our people themselves. Yes, there is a transition in this area. Lastly, is the presidentization of all aspects of Uganda. Hopkins talked about COVID-19 and how innovation works in Uganda. But the COVID-19 issue was a very, very important thing. When there was a dispute between Dr. Ogwang and the Mbarara University. Now, while there are mechanisms, while we have laws and we have a court system that is meant to adjudicate on such conflicts, the whole matter was referred to the president. And it is the president that came up with the final say on this matter. I said, anybody knows that in innovation, the idea belongs to the person who came up with it. So this COVID-19 is Dr. Ogwanga's thing. The university can find other ways of benefiting from Dr. Ogwanga's. While on the surface, that looks like a protecting innovation by the president coming out to back any innovator against any institution like the university. The way it is handled, the conflict resolution mechanism resorted to shows that those who cannot get the ear of the president, those who cannot bring their matters to the attention of the president will never get justice. So while the policy is there, while the structures are there, the implementation, their use is lacking. So can a person, when there is a conflict between a musician and his producer, a poet and his publisher, a book writer and his publisher, if a conflict arises, will they have to go to the president? Will they have to go to the area MP? Or can they trust the court system and bring their matter for adjudication within the court system? And if they were to apply, do they even have the market, the economic muscle to pay for that adjudication? Then lastly is market. Do we have adequate market for our creativity? I have read books like Decolonizing the Mind by Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who assert that colonialism killed creativity and innovation in Africa because people are forced to create in the Western languages that they cannot fully appreciate. And they were saying, we resort to creating in our local languages. Yes, but how many songs in Ateso will get a national market even within Uganda? If they actually produce
Ibrahim, it's a very interesting discussion, but as you conclude, so that we can move forward.
Yes, so Uganda is a country that has over 50 ethnic groups. Now, each of these 50 ethnic groups has a smaller population. We are just lucky by design of the colonial masters that Uganda has a far-reaching coverage, and you will find that you will find a Muteso singing in Uganda. You will find a Munyankole producing the drama in Uganda. So our population is, and the way they are fragmented, they cannot provide enough market for local content. So we find that we have to translate that local content into English in order to have it get a reach and maybe Uganda. So while legally and in terms of policy on the side of government, some enablers have been put in place, these enablers are not effective because they work against a detrimental environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ibrahim. That was very, very, very elaborate, and that was a very interesting discussion. Let me bring Abdu into the discussion. So Abdu, we have heard from Ibrahim as well as Hopkins on the enablers. So the question to you, Abdu, is does Uganda have the necessary enablers for the creative and innovation sector?
Thank you so much, dear moderator, for the latitude once again. I want to appreciate my co-panelists for the wonderful discussion that they've held. Now, we have to observe and maintain that there are two players or two enablers in this sector. We have the government and then we have the citizenry. Now, the question is whether the enablers are sufficient is what I'm going to talk about. Now, to begin with answering this, yes, there are enablers for innovation and creativity in the country, but then they are not sufficient. And also they are not sufficiently being exploited for the betterment of the country. Now, to talk about the government, first of all, the government has demonstrated the political will to promote innovation and creativity. Under the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation, the ministry established the National Research and Innovation Program framework. And specifically, this framework looks into how it can streamline and coordinate activities of creation of innovation and budding enterprises in the country. Let me say, to that effect, there is the National Research and Innovation Fund, which is established by the government. At least we are satisfied that the government has demonstrated its will. But now the question is, how do people benefit from this, and how many people have so far benefited from this is what I find so challenging, and that we ought to address. The question, Ibrahim had earlier on talked about the legal framework. This coupled the political will, we are safe to assume that the enabling framework from the government side is on ground actually, but it is not sufficient. That's my argumentation. We have the Ministry of Education, Science and Sports and Technology, whatever it's called. Now, the best I can understand from education or the ministry is to provide a framework where learners are actually triggered to develop things, not necessarily to understand concepts and theories and then come to practice them or to recite them like they are reciting the Quran. No, I really do not think so. The most important thing here is that you must be educated to understand a concept and then apply it. The Ministry of Education has failed to put this in place. We agree that a Ministry of Education and Sports and Technology, Science and Technology is one of the enablers for innovation and creativity in the country, but they have failed to enable or to spur innovation in the country. And I find that a little bit problematic for our innovation industry. For Uganda to gently march into the middle income status, having a dream of science, innovation, and technology is just not enough. I think it is fundamental that the government does or goes a notch higher by putting facilities on ground, and these facilities should be accessible to the people. First of all, before they're actually accessible to the people ought to understand their existence. You see, so many people do not know the existence of these facilities by the government. Now, it comes back to a point Ibrahim talked about faintly. That's the concept of awareness. Actually, Lester did talk about the awareness of it. You see, not until we inform the citizenry on what to do and what they ought to do, they will definitely keep sitting down and doing nothing. Ibrahim has brought in, actually melodramatized the presidency syndrome, which I laughed at. But who then created the presidency syndrome in this country? Isn't it the people? The people have neglected their rights, and they think that it's the president who can solve it and everything. And at the end of the day, the credit goes to the president because he feels people are relying on him or her. Now, it is very important for organizations such as the people that know it is not the government to come and mitigate or to address your challenges in technology or what of you. It is you to do things. The government is not doing anything to enable you or to lawful or to perform its mandate as demanded by the Constitution or in law. But the fact that they tend to neglect their own rights and look at the president for favors or for recognition is, I find challenging, and we ought to move away from that. First of all, we have the capacity, and the Constitution, specifically at Article 40, gives the right for people to enjoy or to earn lawfully, to undertake any means of production that will earn for them a living together. Now that we have this in place, it is upon each and every person to make use of this. And in an event, people are hindered or encumbered from maximizing their potential, that's when the government will come in. But the government must come as government, but not as an individual. That I find it a little bit problematic. But then, permit me to talk about the second enabler, that is the citizenry or the innovators themselves. Moderator, it is quite logical that the citizenry are not appreciative of the things that we have at hand. You see, for the innovation industry to thrive, there must be recognition of innovation or creative recognition of creativity and innovation. And that is not enough. Upon recognizing a person's creation, we ought to go a notch higher by also appreciating them. You see, I like the analogy given by Ibrahim about the contents. As a matter of fact, as it stands, our media, specifically the TV media, is awash with foreign creations, but not our own. You realize that you realize a folk tale or a skit in a story would basically be listened to by the authorities themselves, of which we are very sure that they may not even attend in totality. But let there be a Z World movie going on somewhere, someone will dedicate each and everything he has to watch that program there, but not our very own. I find that is problematic. It is very important for the people and even the government to let people appreciate our local creation and give it a life. Without breathing into our own activities, there is no way our innovation industry will thrive. I beg to end with that. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Abdu. That was an interesting discussion. Let's start into the discussion. So we are discussing this general question. Does Uganda have the necessary enablers for the creative and innovation sector? Lester, you have the floor. Lester, we can see you're still mute. The question has been directed to you to answer the general question.
Fancy, I think I'm back now.
Okay. So it's your turn to answer the general question. Does Uganda have necessary enablers for the creative and innovation sector?
Thank you, Fancy. I think that question is very clear now to me. You see, I'll begin with the framers of the entire topic. I think they were very careful with their choice of words. The use of the word necessary in this context was really, really important. And I'm going to maximize the use of this word necessary in my submission. Now, my short answer to that is a no. As brutal as it is, Uganda doesn't have the necessary enablers for creativity and innovation. And that is what I'm going to do. So on 4 levels, I will show you how those necessary enablers don't exist in the context of Uganda. One, I'll talk about innovation of the 21st century, or the century in which we are in, or innovation of 2021 and above, being premised on technology. Second, I'll talk about the global market as a contribution to innovation and creativity in any country around the globe, Uganda inclusive. And then thirdly, I will talk about also information and access of the same. And maybe lastly, I'll talk about taxation as an incentivizing sort of policy in enabling creativity and innovation. On the very first one, there has been this glamour around the presence of all these legal framework, all these policies. You know, the entire world knows that Uganda is good at policies, but policy implementation is troublesome, and that's where the problem is. And a policy that has not been implemented cannot be argued as a necessary enabler of anything, including innovation and creativity. So the policies in place, yes, they are in place, but if they are not implemented to therefore enable the said innovation and creativity, then they have failed on the metric of enabling. And that's why I say no, they are not necessary enablers. So the presence of the legal framework, the presence of this policy framework, and the presence of political will, which I highly doubt. In my first submission, I told you that there is no political will, and I would still argue that, but I will not do that today. So the presence of all these policies in place, or the constant glamour around the policies, when the policies do not accrue the necessary enabling framework that we want to see, then cannot be used to show that actually there is an enabler in place. So that is just the preamble. Now, on the very first one, innovation in the times in which we are in is tech-based, okay? It's like people are innovating based on technology. It is no longer those days when you can innovate maybe a pound and meter and you can use it to do your backyard pounding of your maize grains, and you have a meal for your family of 2 or 3. It is no longer the same thing. We need innovation that produces maize flour for an entire country or for an entire society. And if that thing cannot be enabled in a context in which we are talking today, then you cannot argue that there is an enabling framework in place. On technology, there is a huge inclination to internet enable any tech-based innovation. Uganda is a country that taxes internet like internet, and then even if we were able even to pay for that internet, access to it is in and of itself a problematic hazard. And then also the quality of internet that even we pay highly for is something that is poor. And with all this in place, it becomes really hard to innovate in a time when innovation is technology-based. So I dare argue that there is no framework to that effect. And then also in terms of technology also, there is need for robust tech financing. If you avail of innovation at a time like now, then it becomes really problematic. Because, you know, what do I mean by tech financing? There must be things in place, whether in the private or public sector, that enable someone who has an innovation to have access to money to actually finance their idea, grow their idea. You get, we have a whole Uganda Development Bank, but access to money from this bank is almost like, it's so bureaucratic. And in order to even have that access access, you must have grown to a certain level of your business. So small scale businesses, for example, even if you're running a small scale tech farm, for example, you cannot access money from UDB. And if you cannot access that, where else will you get finance for your idea? It is an hindrance and therefore not an enabler. That is one on innovation being tech-based. So if technology in itself is not improved, or access to the same is not improved, then it cannot enable the innovation that is highly based on technology, especially in the time in which we speak. The second thing is market. You see, China will innovate these cheap phones of theirs and bring it to Uganda. Any other country will do their innovation and bring it to Uganda. So Uganda is more of a market for foreign innovation than it is an exporter of local innovation. And where does that stem from? I'll talk about it when I come to point 4 in terms of tax incentivization as an enabler for creation of market. So if there is no global market for Ugandan innovative products, then how would we argue that a level framework? And you know, it's really very hard to invest in your idea and you don't have a market that receives that idea and accrue benefit to give you the motivation for you to proceed with that said idea. So the inability of Uganda to create a global market is something that be of concern. We need to highlight that if we want to argue of an enabling framework. So a framework without it is not there, and without even closer.
Okay, Lester, are you back? I can see you're back. You can proceed with your argument.
All right, cool. Yes. Okay. So I was still talking the global market as an enabling factor in terms of innovation and creativity, and Uganda lacks that. And if that is not in place, then you can't argue of an enabling framework. And I wanted to use the idea of COVID-X. COVID-X was a local product, a Ugandan product that came with glamour. People understood that it was going to transform the treatment of COVID. But where did the story of COVID-X end? In preference to foreign vaccines, one, was there evidence that COVID-X was less effective compared to the vaccines that we are being actually preached to take? If there was no evidence, why didn't we invest in finding evidence that COVID-X is either not effective in comparison with Pfizer, AstraZeneca, or whatever vaccines we are taking? Then we can do that. So if the local industry does not pride on its production, and then therefore can always throw it to the backyard in preference of things that come from outside, then there is a problem with the market we create locally, and then the market that we create. So before we even penetrate in the global market, do we have a local market created? So using all these other things, it becomes really hard. Then thirdly, on information, you see there are 3 things. On art, we have some of the best artists on earth that can produce anything, that can paint anything, that can sketch anything. But how much information do these kids possess on how to leverage on their production? People, if you go to the US or the UK, they will sit down and paint or sketch something and then sell it to maybe a museum, and then they make money out of it because people are visiting the museum and they are paying money, and the people that produce these art pieces are getting money from it. Where do these Ugandan artists market their products from? How many times has the National Museum come for these products that are being sold around the street so that they put them in the museum and then the tourists are paying for them and then the people that produce them then accrue benefit from there? So the lack of that framework becomes a trouble thing. How do musicians make money? How does Justin Bieber make his money? The shows he carries out, the people that attend the shows, running of his YouTube channel. Compare that to a Bebe Cool or a Bobby Wine in Uganda and how they use their music to accrue benefit. We have a populace that prides in what comes outside without what comes from within inside. And that comes from the lack of information that people possess in regard to what is actually inherently ours. And then maybe lastly, on technology, the local preference for whatever comes from outside, and I think I use the idea of COVID-X, and I can cite any other example to show that we have an inherent flow in what we prefer for, that we are easy to go for what comes from outside than what comes from within. So the access to information to that regard is limited. And if it is then limited, there is no enabling framework. And that comes back to education, like I started with, like Abdu talked about. Then lastly, on the idea of incentivization, you see taxation as a policy is not only for revenue generation. Taxation also is a propeller It's a propeller for the things that we do. That if Uganda sees that it has capacity to produce things like COVID, then using its taxation policy or any other policy, it should limit the importation of any other thing that Ugandan can produce so that the market locally can actually source things from Uganda can produce. Look at the Kira Motors. The Kira Motors are now producing buses. But you want Kira Motors to compete.
Okay, I think we can't hear Lester anymore. Lester, we shall have you back at a later stage. Let's move on from here. So thank you so much to our panelists for answering the general question. It was very, very interesting. We had Hopkins say, yes, we have the enablers. Ibrahim agreed with Hopkins, but we have also had Lester disagree that no, we don't have the enablers. So I hope each panelist will be able to defend their arguments, or feel free to cross sides. So moving on, let me start with the specific questions, and I'll start right away with Hopkins. So Hopkins, earlier on, you agreed that Uganda has the enablers for innovation and creativity in this country. My question to you is, compare Uganda and other countries in terms of level of innovation and creativity. Where do we stand? Hopkins, you have the floor. If you compare Uganda and other countries in terms of innovation and creativity, where do we stand? Okay, as we wait on Hopkins.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So comparing Uganda and other countries, first of all, before I answer that question, I'm going to talk about the history of innovation in other countries in the world and the history of innovation in Uganda. So the history of innovation, especially in other countries, it was not just based on development of a human being, like Mr. Muwaya Ibrahim wrote it, that people started Abdu said that people started making fire and all that. So outside countries, people were being creative and making things like novel writing as a new idea of expressing some story. And then like radios, people came up with homophones, people came up with ICT, the internet outside country, while Uganda, were still developing as human beings. Remember all this that they were developing in their history from the 1930s, developing weapons for war, all these things they were developing were for their own development of their state. So with Uganda coming up from the 1995 with its new law and comparing its development of constitutionalism and the political affairs, it has tried to come up to the line of creativity that provides employment, which is the heart of creative industries. For example, when you see Uganda's innovation from 1995, where we have political affairs, we have more education systems coming up, students are studying how to draw, MDD, dance and drama, because these are their talents. They're coming up with new things. They are employing themselves in their own talents, things that are not done anywhere else. You see, Uganda is coming from a bit of a lower state, but it is developing. So I disagree with Garang Lester when he says that we don't have enablers, because we have the intelligence, we have the intellectualness. The fact that there is not enough fund to boost these enablers, which is a barrier, does not show that, or does not mean that there are no enablers. So the percentage of Uganda, comparing it with other countries, I'm going to compare it with European countries. For the fact that Uganda is starting to grow as a developing country, it is on the right pace, and the percentage is actually 40% compared, its growth is going on faster. And we believe that by 2060, the plan will be more musicians coming up, and we have many more people trying to fight for musicians to be able to have a better platform. And so by 2060, we shall have the best music industry, as against anyone who would think that we don't have enough enablers to the creativity industry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Hopkins. I'm moving to Ibrahim. And when answering this question, feel free to defend your stand. So my question to you is, can the activation of innovation and entrepreneurship protect national economy from the forecasted slowdown in economic growth?
Would you please come again on the question?
My question to you is, can the activation of innovation and entrepreneurship protect the national economy from the forecasted slowdown in economic growth?
Thank you very much. That is a very interesting one. There is a forecasted slowdown in economic growth. Would activation of innovation and creativity solve that? Is the forecasted slowdown as a result of a lack of innovation? If yes, then the straight answer would be yes. If not, then the straight answer would be no. But then we are not here for yes and no debate. The economy is a large thing. Innovation and creativity sector, or what we are calling the creative economy today, is only part of the general economy. It simply makes a contribution to the general economy. Uganda's economy as it stands is basically a production, that is agriculture, local agriculture production economy, and a labor export economy. Uganda's biggest contributor to GDP will be found to be its agriculture sector, and then remittances from the Nkumba, the cheap laborers who are exporting all over the place. They are making a big contribution to keeping our balance of trade high. And one would think that the more labor we export out at the expense of a brain drain, excuse me, the higher our economic chances, the higher the chances of our economic survival. However, when you look at the current trends, tourism is getting a very, very, very enhanced share of Uganda's GDP. In fact, tourism is competitively becoming one of the greatest earners. And what are the things that tourists come here to see? Tourism is moving away from the traditional ways of or the traditional attractors, mountain gorillas, mountain peaks, because many countries have these things. And we are coming down to innovation. For example, Uganda put on the market the Rolex, this delicacy that is made by many people at every roadside. It has become a big tourist attractor in the world of, or in the world of foods. And if it can be enhanced and we make the Rolex to be as popular as the pizza is in the world, then we can have the Rolex becoming a very good economic contributor to the country. So an enabling environment in place, and of course an enabling environment including finance and so on. Yes, innovation and creativity is the answer to economic prosperity, not only of Uganda, but of any country in the world. We have seen India has invested in innovation in science and technology, especially in pharmaceuticals and the medical affairs, and they have made a breakthrough. We have seen China creating innovation in manufacturing and technology, and it has made a breakthrough. We have seen how Lee Kuan Yew transformed Singapore, basing on innovation and creativity and strategizing on how to become the link in the world trade economy, and so on and so forth. So looking at that, Kira Motors, manufacturing
as you conclude, locally. Ibrahim.
Yes, so I'm saying that if innovation is supported and creativity enhanced, yes, they can be a solution to the forecast economic meltdown, such that instead of an economic slowdown, we have an economic acceleration. And it is my take that if Uganda is to accelerate its economy, then everything must be done to ensure that Ugandans are innovative, are entrepreneurial, because statistics show that Uganda is the highest entrepreneurial country in the world, but it also has the highest business mortality rate. Now, these businesses that get created every day, the issue is how do we keep them alive for a longer period of time? And if we can do that, then wow, Vision 2040 is a reality, middle income status is a reality, economic boom is the new Uganda rather than slow down. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ibrahim. Let me bring Abdu into the discussion. So Abdu, my question to you is, do you think Uganda should prioritize innovation and creativity above all the other sectors?
Thank you so much, Francis. I agree with you. Yes, Uganda must prioritize innovation.
Your volume is really low. If you could speak to the microphone.
All right, thank you. I hope I'm clear now.
No, speak to the microphone of your headset because we can't hear you properly.
Oh, is it okay there?
Okay, you can.
Speak direct. Am I clear now?
Yes, you are now clear.
Thank you so much. My question is, must or should Uganda prioritize innovation at the expense of other sectors? My respective answer is that it cannot be that way, but there is need to prioritize innovation in this country. Innovation in itself relies on other sectors as well for its clients. So we cannot promote innovation in isolation of others, in isolation of other sectors. It is very fundamental and crucial at this material point in time that Uganda focuses on innovation on its match to the middle income status. How will the government do this is what I want to address. I had earlier hinted that there are frameworks, there are programs in space put by the government, but they are not sufficient enough to bring about or to promote innovation and creativity in the country here. Now it comes back to that same problem that I do say that the government must first of all make this framework sufficient and effective. How will this government do this? I understand that the majority of the people do not understand the government policies. And it begins from there. The government must take a deliberate effort to inform the people about the policies that they have at hand and the funds that they have at hand for people to benefit. The government will continue making policies, will continue providing for these schemes, but people will continue not benefiting from them or actually tapping, maximizing them, but until they make a discovery of it. For instance, the innovation fund, which is in existence, how many people can actually access this? What criterion does the government put in place for people to access this? There are so many people out there who do not understand this. the existence of these funds here. Now, the government should actually move away from making a serialized creation of programs without actually attaining or harvesting better returns from the ones that they have. We have gotten programs such as the UNOSAF program, which died as it is, without any information or without any accountability there. We have programs such as the youth livelihood program, which is still ongoing, I understand. We have the yoga. How many times has the government looked into these programs and assessed its viability before they publish another one, the Paris model so forth? Before the government serializes each and every program that they bring on board, there must be a feasibility study or report on how viable they are and how they have benefited the intended beneficiaries. Now, even when these programs are in space, very few people do understand the essence of these programs here and how they can tap into them. I think that is where the problem is. The government has to prioritize innovation. They can do that by only informing the people about the programs that they have put in place, and then two, protecting innovators from from piracy, from being cheated by the outside market, and then from being exploited as well by competitors or adversaries in the market. Innovation is very important, especially at this material point in time where there are so many pressing issues that has to be solved in the country. We have talked about a climate insecurity. There is a threat to our climate, but how many people have come up clearly to produce innovations that can address the question of climate change? There are very few about that, and the government must make a deliberate effort to the people that they must come up with this, and such people who come up should be promoted. We have universities in place. The government must inject enormous funds into these universities for purposes of research and research implementation at the end of the day. It is not good enough for government to establish a research institute at Makerere University, but it is underfunded. I find that a little bit challenging. For realistic sake, if at all the government is desirous of making innovation the epicenter of development in the country, they must deliberately promote it by funding it, and then taking stock of whatever thing they're doing. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Abdu. Let me move to Lester, and Lester, you have a chance to defend yourself, as Hopkins earlier on disagreed with you. But minus that, my question to you is, looking at it from a subsistence approach, is COVID-19 pandemic going to serve as an engine to innovation?
Okay, thank you once again, Fancy. Am I audible?
Yes, Lester, we can hear you.
Fancy, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Oh, okay, cool. So I'll start with a question, and then I'll come to defending my position a little later. My question is, if from the subsistence perspective, if COVID-19 is going to serve as a sort of an enabler.
Are you guys able to hear Lester? I seem to have lost him. Ibrahim, are you able to hear Lester?
No, I can't hear him.
Okay, Lester, are you back with us? Okay, Lester seems to have a connection problem. Let me move back to Hopkins. So as we wait for Lester, let me ask a question. So we are moving to the solution part of the discussion. And my question to Hopkins is, how can you as a youth support and promote creativity and innovation in Uganda?
As a youth, my stand still is, I am going to use my voice, internationalism. I am going to use my voice. I tell the people about what they can do, how creative they are, and how they can express their creativity.
Okay.
Garang, so I was still saying, so if I as a youth can stand up and tell my fellow youth, and I I use my voice to tell people, look here, you can use your creative talent to employ yourself. You don't need to first go to school and you know what, and look for a job elsewhere, wherever, so that you can get employed. You can actually go to school, get land, and use yourself exports, the exportation rather than the imports that come in, the more imports that come in. So all I have to say is that as youth, we have to stand up. Now we already know that we have to Uganda so that we can enhance our innovative industry and create employment. We have to stand up and tell those that do not know, those that do not have the knowledge, that look, and then we in a way. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Hopkins, for giving us a stand on how, as a youth, you can promote creativity and innovation in the country. So let's have Lester back. Lester, you were making your point before you went off. So you have the floor, Lester.
Yes. So, all right, thank you, Fancy. So I'll just kind of restart because I said that subsistence in and of itself is premised on the idea of provision of quick solutions to pressing challenges. And that's why when you look at the nature of subsistence, maybe if you categorize it into the subsistence farming, subsistence production, the unique need urgently. We are farming because we are growing or we are rearing animals for our own consumption. That is the most pressing thing we need to solve at that level. So when we are faced with enormous challenges, we need to quickly find solutions. Short answer is yes, COVID should be an enabler for challenges that we face. And I think COVID has already been that, okay? Because before COVID, there were things that were almost illusional to imagine. For example, e-commerce was almost something that people would not even venture into. E-education was also something. But when COVID happened, everything moved online, including all these three among others. There was a robust increase in e-commerce. People started shopping online, and delivery service providers were too busy delivering things or property or goods to people because that was the only situation or only way people could access the things they wanted to buy. Companies like Jumia, companies like every other company decided to have a branch of online commerce. What was the need of the time? The same thing, education. Institutions of learning transitioned to online provision of education services. The same way to e-government. Government in itself was forced to leverage on its existing mechanisms to provide e-government services. So COVID was the only thing that propelled people to move to this effect. So it is true that COVID can then be a propeller of innovation, regardless of the subsistence nature of the economy or of the people. Because one thing is clear, at the end of the day, when we are faced with challenges, we are going to find our way out, and COVID showed us that. So yes, it is very possible to use COVID as an argument of Hopkins. You see, I am not going to the fact that they are seemingly enabling, but you see, Fancy, the problem is we need to Hopkins and any other person is actually arguing are things that are so rudimentary. They were necessary then, but in the time in which we speak, it is no longer enough to just.
Okay, let me bring Ibrahim into the discussion at this stage then. So Ibrahim, my question to you is, since we are at a stage where we are providing solutions to the issue at hand, what should be the economic policy for supporting the development of creativity and innovation in Uganda?
Thank you very much, Fancy. The economic policy for supporting and development of innovation in Uganda should center around 3 or 4 things. One is setting frameworks for identifying and encouraging the development of new ideas to solve local and international problems. Two, put in place a mechanism for funding ideas. Uganda has a policy system where the only access to economic support is by collateral, physical collateral,
Okay.
which many younger people, especially, who should be the beneficiaries of innovation and who should be the one engaging in innovative activities, may not have. So the government should establish security for people, for younger people with ideas, proven ideas, a mechanism where younger people can submit their ideas. And there is a team of technocrats who can look into these ideas. And if they see them workable, take a chance on them and enable them to get funding even when they do not have collateral to give to these financial institutions. Programs like the Youth Development Fund and the EMIOGA and so on should be modified to, rather than just give out money to people to start from wherever, money is channeled to those people who already have ideas on the ground and can really develop them. So instead of telling youth, well, here is the money, find what you can do to keep yourself surviving, we should look for those youth that have already started things and empower them with the necessary monetary fund, with the necessary technical support, with the necessary market survey and the outreach. Then lastly, any economic policy that supports innovation should look at access to information and data as Lester later submitted. We need to look at the expenses of data today. Government had come up with the My Uganda Internet Wi-Fi provider, and I don't know what happened. They decided to start charging for it. Even when its outreach was very limited, government started charging people for using My Uganda Wi-Fi services. So we need to have very cheap, if not actually totally free, internet access in order to propel the ideas of younger people in marketing. Lester has been talking of online marketing, but it is quite expensive when you have to use or to buy data at the current exorbitant prices. So the economic policy should look at setting up a framework to actually identify those people with ideas, help them register them, and draw them or develop them to a commercial level. Two, the target should be people who have already come up with ideas. So
as you conclude,
people who have come up with ideas. And three, there should be very affordable internet so that these people can capitalize on the global market provided by internet to have their ideas breakthrough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Ibrahim. I'm moving to Abdu. So Abdu, how best do you think the government can promote innovation and creativity in this country?
Thank you so much. Am I heard? Can someone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. You see, Fonsi, I like the questions and I think they are quite genius and they are fundamental. How can the government promote innovation in this country here and creativity, innovation and creativity in this country here? Like I did say earlier on, that the government should first of all have a deliberate interest to promote innovation in this country here. Short of that, there is nothing we can really do much. Everything gravitates around the government will. Because ordinarily the citizenry are doing something. But the question is, are they protected? Can they be promoted? The insecurity that surrounds innovation is what is yet endemic, and the government will have to come to address these problems here. There is no problem with ideas. There is no problem with idea creation, but the problem is financing the ideas to sprout to fruition. Now, I did say previously that at the various universities that we have, these are thinking hubs. These are intellectual facilities where people reason, where people experiment things. But where do these experiments end? At the end of a thinking process, there must be an experiment to that effect there. That a person who has generated a machine or who has innovated a machine from a laboratory is able to demonstrate how it works. And when he or she does that, the government will come into support. Or else a student who may not necessarily have an idea, who might have not necessarily innovated something but has the idea, is given the latitude to investigate or to make research on that. We must inject enormous funds into the various universities where thinking actually takes place to fund research processes so that students, also that the researchers are able to come out with a substantial topics with substantial innovation ideas. And then these things are funded. They shouldn't really end in the laboratories, or they shouldn't end in the libraries where they are. That's the most the government can really do. But now, what more can the government do besides funding this? I hinted on the MYOGA or the government programs which are ongoing right now. Ibrahim elaborated on it. The government intention of alleviating people from poverty. Best of
okay, Abdu, as you conclude,
gives the people who wish to have something done or who wish to be men, puts this money in their hands. Yes, as I'm concluding something, the government must open up market outside, both internally and outside the country. Without doing that, the government would not really benefit so much from the innovation industry. I want next time, if at all the country is going out to Dubai, it's not enough to take the plane the other side there. The government can actually do more and take the little innovation from Chibuye, from wherever, and display to the outside world, so that people will come and appreciate the properties or the commodities that we produce at home. I think that's the most the government can do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Now let's start. How can a country like Uganda become a driver of innovation and creativity?
Okay, thank you, Fancy. Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you. Oh, okay. I guess Lester will come back at a later stage. So I would like to thank all our panelists at this moment for the very, very elaborate discussions that we have so far had, and for all the contributions that you've made to this discussion. I would like to get your closing statements as we come to the end of our debate for today. So I will start right away from Ibrahim. So Ibrahim, in a minute, please give us your closing remark.
Thank you, Fancy. Innovation and creativity is becoming the world's #1 employer. Creativity is at the heart of innovation. If Uganda is going to develop, and if we are going to attain middle income status, we need to invest in innovation, because all countries that have developed on the back of innovation. We have a fairly enabling legal framework, but it is not backed up with sufficient implementation procedures to develop the innovation industry in this country. We need to develop conflict resolution mechanisms that are specific to the innovation industry in this country. Uganda must come up with a mechanism of supporting youth that have innovative ideas to put them at a commercial level by especially promoting both local and international tourism. Although it is against the flow of capitalism, Uganda needs to provide fair protection to its nascent performing and creative industries against the influx of foreign content, and which is cheaper and maybe of better quality. We must understand that that foreign content we are bringing in today has had time to develop in those countries where we're importing it from before it can come to a level where it can be consumed globally. I believe and trust that innovation and creativity is going and will be the driver for the economic transformation of Uganda. We ignore it at our own peril. Thank you. Fancy, are you there?
Brian, thank you. I get you.
Okay, thank you, Ibrahim. Let's hear from Abdu.
Thank you so much. On a conclusive note, I do agree essentially that innovation is the epicenter of development in the country. Due income status, the government and the people must rely heavily on innovation besides other sectors. And this is what the government must actually do to promote this. One, the government should promote the informal sector. Two, the government should make changes within the education system so as to promote thinking and creation of things. And then thirdly, the government must promote domestic consumption by necessarily restricting the consumption of foreign produce so that we are given a chance to benefit from our own. Without which, if at all we cannot appreciate our own production, then it will be very unlikely other people outside would listen to us or take it from us, our goods. And then fourthly, the government should establish the funds and make it available to the consumers or to the beneficiaries. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Abdu. I think your discussion has really centered around the government, and I hope they will be able to bring the changes that you need. So let us hear from Hopkins. So Hopkins, you have the floor.
Thank you. So today's discussion has been a great one. Well, one thing that I have to emphasize on is that, well, Uganda has the enablers, but it has a lot of barriers that are hindering these enablers. From the beginning, we looked at the law in Uganda. The law in Uganda enables us to innovate. It doesn't in any way stop us. Then we look at the spaces in Uganda. We have activism, intellectual spaces, we have debate spaces, we have all these kinds of liberal movements and radical movements that are going on in Uganda that promotes creativity style Gwang from us, like the students from Muwaya University. But now the hindrance, the barriers are that when these people come up with these creative measures or these transitions in our own country, we don't have anything that boosts them to continue. For example, these art students who draw imaginative composition and design whatever they design, they do not get their products, and they don't have markets. Like we have seen, their products don't have markets. So what Uganda needs to do is bring more knowledge to the table. More knowledge to the table on how people are going to create market for whatever they create. And it is more involved in the government. The government should create better platforms to enhance innovation. This education that we are studying, that we are just wanting to study what happened in the past and we are not studying practicability should be revised to something that is practical. We need to have better ways of enhancing our own creativity since we already have it. And that is where I say that today's discussion should be fruitful if we have more movement to create this knowledge. People should know that we need to come up with better measures to create our own markets for our own creative industries. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Hopkins. Last but not least, let us hear from Lester.
Fancy? Okay, thank you. It's very terrible to discuss innovation with the network that the innovation metric already provides, but we shall bear with it. So my question was what Uganda as a country should do to tap into the robust innovation and creativity industry or to improve the same in the local perspective. My co-panelists have already underscored the importance of skilling or education or what I call capacity building in the broader perspective in that. So I'll just throw a little light on that, then I proceed to the rest. In the country Uganda, there is need to first of all reform the kind of education that we get. And I think I say this with authority, from the position of authority, because I have been through the system and I still am within the system. But to be honest, this is a system that I have given up on at personal level. You see, because the system does not seem to live up to the demands of the time. We are still using the same rudimentary means of skilling people, of educating. And if anything is supposed to be done, it's done in a hasty manner that doesn't seem to be cognizant of the urgent need to reform the system. If you look at the new primary curriculum, for example, I think they sat down and all of them even complained, after complaining on media, including the Minister of Education herself, that there is a problem with the system, and perhaps they sat down and said, okay, there is need to reform the system. But what did they bring as a replacement of the system? A problematic thing also. Because one, you can't wake up today, realize today that there is a problem, and then tomorrow you have a strategy, and by the end of tomorrow, you're already implementing the strategy. It simply shows the hastiness in trying to implement a new thing just to appear like there is something new that is being brought, but without a cognizance of the need to actually reform. They need to do a proper diagnosis of the problematic education system that is in place, and then do a proper medication of the same, using policies that have been researched and approved. Because, for example, the teachers that are teaching the new system, when were they actually upskilled? Did anyone call them maybe somewhere and skill them in delivering of something? So the only thing that came in was some practicality that doesn't seem to conform to what we actually direly need. So there is need to improve the system of education. For one simple thing, to build capacity. We can argue the need to have innovation. We can argue the need to be creative. But if the system in place do not enable us to get what we need, then it is problematic still. The problem is capacity needs to be built. How is capacity built? I already talked about reforming the education system.
Lester, as you conclude.
Look at you. All right, cool. Yes, I'm concluding. Look at USE, look at UCE, the Universal Primary Education, UPE. They are direly in need. Education is actually provided by the private education service provider. So they need to fund the system in the first place and then reform the system to conform to the needs of the time. They also need to tap into the global market of education. And I think this is something that other countries are already doing. We look at countries like Rwanda. They're sending their kids to the US, to the UK scholarships to get these skills that are conformative to the time. Doing the same. Countries like Ghana and even South Africa are doing the same. How many Ugandan kids are sponsored or get these scholarships as a result so that they may implement them within the country? So that is something that even if I spend the entire day saying it alone, it has capacity to inform how the rest then come up to then improve the innovation atmosphere. Thank you. Fancy?
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Lester. We have come to the end of today's debate. I would like to extend my gratitude to Center for Constitutional Governance, that is CCG, and Civic Space TV for sponsoring this program and organizing it. Thank you so much. I would like to also thank our panelists who really debated this topic. Thank you for doing the research. Thank you for being very elaborate. We really appreciate. I would like to also thank the viewers. Our topic for today has been innovation is the world's emerging biggest employer, and the creative industry is the heart of innovations. Does Uganda have the necessary enablers for the sector? Thank you. See you again next week, same time.